Hello, I'm Marcia Logan. 2013 is the 25th anniversary of the Estes Park Duck Race, thought to be the second longest running duck race in the United States. That's quite an accomplishment for this small community. I'm proud to be the chair, or the big duck, of this historic event. With the races concluded this year, over $2 million in proceeds will have been distributed to the various charities in the Estes Valley. That too is quite an accomplishment. We're going to celebrate the present by turning to the past. Jim Pickering, the historian laureate of Estes Park, will moderate a discussion with a few of the many people responsible for turning an idea into reality. They will share memories of those early years with us. Let's join Jim now and listen to the discussion.
It's the 25th anniversary of the Estes Park Duck Race, and we're here today to talk about the beginnings and early years of what's become an annual rite of spring, or sometimes of late winter, here in Estes Park. I'm Jim Pickering, and my job is to serve as moderator. And with me today are 6 duck race veterans. Let me introduce each of them. We have Nick Kane, one of the guys who started this whole thing 25 years ago. Bob Hamlin, Rob Ludlum, Dennis McHenry, Jack Overly, and Don Widrig. Thank you all for participating. We're going to be very informal here. I'm just going to toss out questions and let you guys dive in, and we'll let the conversation go wherever it goes. But Nick, let's begin with you. You got this whole thing started 25 years ago. Tell us how it all came together and got underway.
Well, that was early April. Don't ask me the year, I don't remember. There were chamber after hours business meeting at the Craig's Lodge. So after the meeting was over, I was a couple of saloon owners, including myself, and a couple of other people, we went to the bar to have a cocktail. So, hard winter, slow economy, we were talking about how can we do something to kind of like boost the mentality to the community, and to kind of like make us feel good and get into the season. So Stanley Pratt, which is deceased now,
he was the theater owner, right?
He owned the theaters and the radio station, and he said, guys, he said, I was on vacation in Oregon, and I seen the darndest thing they were doing up there. They were having a duck race. And then, of course, we look at each other and we said, Stan, no more drinking for you. Anyway, he says, no, seriously. He says, they were little rubber ducks. So Mike Nagel, he's deceased also, he says, well, he says, Nick is on the top of the river and I'm on the bottom of the river. Why don't we start a duck race over here? Next thing you know, we had a duck race. This is only April. We all agreed, shook hands. We all gonna participate, and we're gonna do the duck race. Then we're deciding, in another meeting we had in somebody's bar, what day to have it and how to name it. How do we spread the word out? And somebody said, I don't remember who right now, but why don't we have it the same day as Kentucky Derby? So people will remember the duck race, and that's when we named it the Ducky Derby.
Got it.
At the time. And of course, there was Mike McDonald, retired from the telephone company, Steve Nagel, the soundman, of course. Will Barr, and Stanley Pratt, and myself. Stan did the advertising because he had the radio and the theaters. Mike McDonald did most of the footwork. And the rest of us did whatever was to be done. I mean, we didn't have secretaries, we didn't have special meetings, we just did everything spur of the moment,
on
right?
the fly.
On the fly.
So you had a committee of 4?
We had a committee of 4. So then the community got involved. Then people coming around, oh, what can I do? Can I do this? And of course, then it got, as I said, we were 4, and then we had maybe 100 other people involved helping with everything.
How many folks turned out for that to see the first one?
For the, you mean how many
Yeah,
participants?
yeah. How many ducks did you have, and how many
Well,
people?
if I remember right, I think the first one we had, we raised right around 30,000, over 30,000, between 30 and 40,000, you know, and then, of course, because they were so success, just putting it in 30 days, people were so excited. Then we got people involved in Kansas City. There was a radio station advertising that.
All the way in Kansas City?
All the way in Kansas City. Wow. There was a bus tours coming up with people for the darn duck race. I mean, it was a whole weekend event. For us, I mean, it was just like, wow, why didn't we think of it before?
I know, Nick, that bus group, we got in trouble with you because we postponed the race one year because the water had been so low the previous year. And I know that we caught hell from you because your bus load didn't tie in with their schedule.
That's right, that's right. But anyway, there was people involved on the duck race the first couple of 3 years, or until things got to the point to where it got to be too big for us. We couldn't handle it. And again, we were an organization that we didn't have bylaws and minutes and all that. So that's when Mike McDonald was a member of the Rotary Club, and he says, well, why don't we go to one of the service clubs, see if they would like to take it over. And of course, he approached the Rotary Club, and you guys, being minded community organization, took it over, and it became a success.
They've had it ever since.
It's grown ever since. It's grown ever since.
How about the rest of you? How'd you get involved?
Well,
You like
Rod Hallberg, Steve Nagel and Mike McDonald came to Rod Hallberg, who was president of Rotary at the time, and asked if we would take it over. Somehow or other, I got asked to chair a committee to look into whether or not Rotary ought to do this. So I came back with a proposal.
Right there?
Right there.
Wow.
To the Rotary Club, and suggested organizational structure. One of the things in there that Mike and Steve said was that if we screw up, we're going to take it back. So anyway, we took it over. Here's a picture of the first committee.
Now that would have been what, 95? Is that the date you took it over?
No, we took it over in 94.
94, okay.
Yeah, this picture was February 23rd, 1994. The Al Wasson, and if you didn't know Al, you know he's the Wasson room at the library.
Right.
Lynn Kaufman was a CPA in town, and ultimately a president. Bill Patterson, and I think Bill Patterson is David Taylor's father-in-law at the bank. Marv G. was publicity, Ron Gordon was prizes, Jack Overly did all the special events, I was the general chair, and I said, an obvious question, if Rotary is going to take it over, the board's going to ask who's going to be chair, and I said, since I know the most about it at this point, I'll do it for the first 2 years, and then you're on your own.
And you did, and they were.
And then there was Tom Seeley, who handled tickets. Tom was around for a couple of years and then moved to Indiana, but it was...
What were some of the problems, the early problems in those first years that you...
The early problems we had, the first one, we had a net across the river. And the second year, the number of ducks that were tripled. So somehow the net broke before we were ready to let him in. And of course, he had people jumping in, you know, pushing the rest of them in, and it was a big fiasco right there.
Chaos.
It worked, yeah. Other glimpses we have was the weather. Some years it'll take hour and a half to get down to the behind the wheel bar. Other year will take, well, we had a year that took 47 minutes. Wow. The weather was high. And this is early May now, almost the day of the Kentucky Derby. Now we had 1 year that it snowed and it was cold and there was no water in the river. It took 4.5 hours to get there. And the volunteer fire department and other volunteers had to push them with brooms.
Down the river. Down the river bed. Right?
Down the river bed, yeah.
Had to teach the ducks how to walk.
We tried to do that, and then we tried to get them to fly, but they didn't.
Well, at that one point, I think the water was waist deep down near Riverside, and it was very, very dangerous.
Yeah, I remember
Super
seeing
concerned
photographs
about
of
it.
guys down there at the firemen down there in the
Yeah.
riverbed.
And we thought that perhaps we should change it to a later date, but the weather's pretty temperamental, so the later date wasn't that much better either, but we did try that one.
So the
year.
weather is a problem. What are some of the other early problems?
Well, one other thing regarding the weather, I can recall we used to have the tents set up on the night before on Friday night, and I recall going down there on a Saturday morning. We'd had a windstorm, the 20 by 20 was twisted and laying on the ground, and so weather was a big issue.
Heat, cold, wind, storm, high water, low water.
I've shoveled snow off down at Riverside Plaza, so we could.
Well, the first year we had it, it took about 2 hours and 40 minutes. And then we moved it, we delayed it a week. Took 37 minutes the next year. That was the year, you remember, Tom Maher would be up to his waist in the river trying to
Pull the things down.
pull the thing
Yeah,
down.
yeah. Other problems? Weather seems to be the biggest one, but
Really, those were the most problems that kind of held it back, or at the week when we had that, you know, we used to take times for $1. And you say, well, I think the first duck's when I get there in 30 minutes and 45 seconds. If you won, half of the money went to charity, the other half went to the winner.
Yeah, Al Sager sold those.
So, yeah.
tickets.
Anyway, and sometimes people, you know, will just kind of like, well, I thought I was going to get there with the way the water's flowing, and I get there in, you know, hour and a half, and it took 45 minutes, whatever.
yeah.
But what happened, that brought up another issue too with the state, because at that time the state was in the process of revising or coming up with some gambling laws, and we were falling under that blanket as a duck race. So one of our members, Jim Cope, had some affiliation apparently with some of the legislatures, and actually went down and had that law structured so that duck race was excluded as being a gambling issue. But we were, since that time, though, we never were able to time the race. Isn't that correct, Dennis?
Good.
Well, yeah, that, actually, I think that our local representative in the state government introduced a bill to exempt duck races from being classified as a raffle. And that created quite a stir down there. And he actually had to withdraw that bill. And somehow or other, the legislative body introduced themselves or something that a duck race is not a raffle. And this caused quite a stir with all the raffle managers. And I happened to be one. I was the raffle manager for the Scottish Festival. And I had to go every 3 years and get recertified. And the last one I went to, the instructor on this that was saying, well, this is a raffle, that's a raffle. And I don't know why, but the duck race is not a raffle.
There was one important feature that we had to adhere to, and to this day we still do. And that is that if a household requests a free duck race adoption form, we are obliged to send them a free adoption form. They don't have to buy it. In other words, no purchase necessary.
So you made case law
We did.
in Colorado.
Yes.
This duck race
Yes.
is on the books.
It's,
in Colorado.
and one of our strict rules is that we have to provide the ability to have a no purchase
Kind
necessary.
of opt-out deal. Okay. all
And
right.
typically, in the course of a year, we typically have about 12 applications that come through for a free adoption form. And by the way, we are not selling duck race tickets. We're adopting ducks.
Yeah.
Okay, another part of this lottery raffle deal.
You walk in a. Never mind.
Wow, it's a very, very fine
I'm gonna
one.
go there.
We waddle carefully.
That provision is what put the thing through the legislature.
That's correct.
That we wouldn't be selling anything.
Right.
Yeah.
We're just handing out adoption forms, and those people are adopting a duck.
Well, I've always known Estes Park wrote a lot of Colorado history. I never realized that you were in the statute books of the
We're
state.
there.
Yeah, okay. We've been talking about changes, and you mentioned one, Bob, about Rotary taking it over, but let's talk about some of the changes over the years. We might begin with the ducks themselves. How the ducks, I've got some, I think I've got, are these this is how it all started with this size duck, or is
The ones we had at first, they were kind of like styrofoam type of
yeah,
duck.
this is, yeah.
That's a styrofoam duck.
Yeah.
And then, you know, for Rotary Club, well, then of course it graduated to plastic ones. And then I guess it's been
Yeah,
plastic.
good.
since then.
Like this, the plastic one's kind of
Yeah,
like this one.
you know.
So why did you change? What were the problems with the styrofoam and? What
They were floors easy, they were kind of like hide behind the rocks and they won't, you know, water wouldn't take them down, they were too light, so to speak.
They're also much more fragile.
Yeah.
The rocks in our river really beat them.
One of the things that you have to realize about the duck race is that it is a natural race course, and everything can and will, including the weather, happen. So the ducks get hung up in the rocks, they get hung up in the trees, the branches. To this day, we still have an effort before the duck race to clean the river so as to minimize the number of ducks getting hung up and lost and everything.
So there's public service involved in all
There
this
is a
as
lot
well.
of public service involved.
One of the other problems we had was duck race that only lasted 35 minutes, and it was difficult for people to get down to the finish line. A lot of people didn't show up until the ducks were well
On the way.
underway.
So you don't want it to be too short, but not good people don't
Too
get
long.
down. Too long, they don't, okay.
4 hours
So
is
just,
not good.
what is the just right? If you had to say, you know, I want the optimum duck race, what would that be?
I'd say 2 hours.
Two
2 hours is quite workable.
The attention span of the average adult, right? Okay.
Well, now you have to
We
remember.
have studied stream flow over the years and average stream flow, and there are times when businesses in town want us to move the duck race to July or something like that, but the stream flow would be so high at that point that the people could not stand to catch the ducks at the finish line.
Oh my.
We've had situations where we came fairly close to saying that we're going to have to tie a rope around the duck catchers and tie them to the bank, because if they fell in those high streams, they're going to end up in Loveland.
Yep.
Of course, now you have to remember that it started at Mickey's
Right.
and ended at the Wheel Bar. That's probably the two biggest days they had.
Yeah.
But that brings up the matter of security also,
Yeah.
because the river can be dangerous, and also we can lose ducks, but a big issue is having people there to control the flow, watch what's happening with the ducks, and
So you got people
Keep
walking,
people- keep
actually
people safe.
walking the riverbank,
We have
patrolling for security and for duck control and everything.
We have approximately 80 people on the security force that day, spread out more or less evenly all the way down the river. to do exactly what Jack is talking about, having, you know, some control over what's happening here.
But we have no authority to arrest people, for instance. Kids love to try and get the ducks.
Yeah, of course they do.
And we have to tread a fine line over, say,
We had
please.
two little problems along the riverbank, and one of them was controlling the kids.
Yeah.
We were
yeah.
afraid some little tyke was going to fall in and drown, so we had to keep a good eye on them. And the other was that a lot of the visitors in town didn't really know what was going on, and oh, that's cute, I'll take one home. And so our security people kept their eye on those two things especially, keeping the kids out of the water. And
Keeping the ducks in the water.
Keeping the ducks in the water and the people out of the water.
Yeah.
I can recall a lady being stopped that had a bucket full of ducks.
Yeah,
she'd
she
collected.
collected a whole bunch of, oh yeah.
Didn't seem to have a clue as to what the race was all about.
Yeah.
What other changes? I know one, at one point you guys morphed this thing, one day event, into a Duck Fest weekend, but then you went back to the one day, so there's a story there.
Yeah, I think we had a very creative and imaginative early committee that said, let's make this into a bigger event. And in many ways, we bit off more than we could really chew. And we thought, well, let's have a parade. Well, first year the parade was really pretty good. The second year, the participants fell off. Same thing, I don't remember how many years precisely we had the golf tournament. But we had storytelling, we had pancake breakfast, and we decided, wait, I think this was after I was chair, but the idea was to focus on the duck race itself, and as a community service project, to allow organizations to raise money.
And so just take it back to the one day. Yeah.
In 1996, we had the golf tournament was, at that time, was part of Duck Fest, as we called it then. So we had the golf scramble, we had storytelling on a Friday night before the race, we had a morning glory bike ride up through the national park, we had a family bike ride, we had a pancake breakfast, and on and on and on. In fact, we had a dinner dance one night, didn't we, Bob?
Yeah,
Remember?
yeah.
So those are the things we did.
My job all this time was, well, 1996 was my first year, was shirt sales. And I was up at the crack of dawn the day of the bike race, and it was cold.
Yes.
I had sweatshirts there, and I sold out of sweatshirts almost immediately.
They're very enterprising. I know the number of ducks that now race down there is staggering, but how many people do you have any sense of how many people turn out just to watch and be involved, quite apart from the sales? Anybody ever? I know there are
It
thousands.
varies from year to year,
Yeah.
depends on the weather.
Yeah, because of the weather, sure.
Yeah, but there's quite a few people, if the weather's nice, that turn out, especially families, people with kids.
And we're up to what, 5,000 ducks or so at this point? That's
Yeah.
a lot of ducks.
Yeah.
Where do the ducks spend the rest of the year?
In a barrel,
A duck barrel.
duck barrel.
One thing because of course now that I hear all this legality, we were illegal to begin with.
Yeah.
We started a duck squad.
Oh, yes.
Somebody came up with the idea. There was the guy who made the first poster. We used to start selling posters, and of course T-shirts and everything else
Right.
to go with that. And he says, down in Florida, I've seen where they have this, like you do a football pool. So we went ahead and had it built, and we call it the duck squad, with live ducks. So we used to take that around. We took it to Loveland, to VFW, we took it to Logman, to VFW, up here to the Legend, the Will Bar, to Lanigan's, to the Day of the Duck race at Nick's in the parking lot. So you pay $20 per square, and we use live ducks. So wherever the duck went and did his thing, as the square, they won the money. So half of the money went to charity, the other half went to the winner.
Okay.
There were 100 squares, a 10 by 10 grid.
And that didn't get you into trouble?
Well, we had to stop because of the very thing that Dennis was
Okay,
talking
okay.
about.
We tried it again last year.
But, no, actually it's perfectly legal because what we did was we have a state licensed game master who authorizes and oversees the duck squat, and that's legitimate. It's a legitimate kind of raffle that we run, and it's perfectly acceptable in the state regulations.
So we're legit.
We're legit. Aside
We're legit.
from the race itself, the duck squat creates the most excitement.
Oh,
Yeah.
Sure
It always
does.
did, didn't it? People go crazy
Oh,
over
yeah.
it.
People 6 feet deep looking down into that square to see what that duck's gonna do and when.
It's a square about 10 feet on a side. And as Dennis says, the people cluster around there, they're cheering on the duck. And
We've been talking about logistics, and you've talked about a number of them. I'm interested, who put together the prize boards down? I mean, that in itself is an enormous undertaking, be able to catch these things, the ducks, and get the numbers up on the board, and so people can see.
When we started, we had town officials on that. We didn't want us to be part of that. We don't want people to say, you didn't catch the first duck, you cut the third one and wrote down the wrong one, or whatever. You know how people
You
are.
didn't want controversy.
No controversy. We were illegal to begin with, that's now that I know. So we had the town officials, we had the mayor was, the chief of police, town member, trustees, they were catching the duck. They were, catching the duck and telling which number and all that stuff.
They were the truth squad. In other
Yes.
words. Yeah. Okay. Okay. But who came up with the idea of putting those boards together? And where do the boards?
I think
I think.
you guys started it.
1994, yeah,
Yeah.
Ron Gordon was our prize chair. I think he went door to door downtown. We ended up with something over 300 prizes. And then Ron Gordon and I forget, maybe Tom Seeley helped.
And Bill Wachs was in on that.
well, that was later.
Because Bill wasn't in Rotary at the time. But that's when the prizes started, and we put those boards up at the wheel bar. And I know we had duck, if my memory is correct, we had duck catchers in the water. They would hand the duck to a runner who would run it up to the wheel bar, put the number in the computer, and then that would tie it in with the human.
Okay. So the logistics are enormous. I mean,
Well,
really,
and Jim, it's gotten to the point where it requires a lot of procedure to do this, because the generous merchants in town, we get, let's say, 700 prizes that are going to be handed out as a result of the duck race. So you can't fool around with that. I mean, there's a lot of action going on.
Sure.
We currently have 6 prize boards that we fill up and put out there by the wheel bar with the prizes as they come in real time. And as you might expect, there's crowds of people wandering around at the boards looking at and seeing if they win a prize.
Sure. Well, that's the competitiveness, just like the Kentucky Derby where it all began.
I want to make.
Jim, well, I'm just going to say, I think the biggest change and the most important change that's come along is that we do have this thing computerized. It was
Twice.
all done by hand in the very beginning,
Well-
and it just got to be overwhelming.
Dennis, when we took it over, George Williford was the Don Widrig of the day, and so he wrote the first program for us to randomize. Somebody didn't adopt a specific duck. They adopted a duck, and then the computer would shuffle them and come out.
And Don is he's the guru
then
today.
yeah,
Because
Don-
I saw that chart you put together
Yeah, Don
in the
is,
beginning.
Don
Yes.
redid the
We
program.
were forced into this because the race was getting larger and larger. We had more and more prizes. We had more and more ducks. The largest number of ducks we've ever run down the river was over 7,000 ducks back in 2007. And when you start talking about those kind of numbers, you have to do something. And so it's all completely computerized. The prizes, the merchant donations, the winners, all of that sort of stuff is now computerized because you simply couldn't do it by hand. You know, Nikki, when they were doing it early on, they would take a long time to do this by hand.
We had girlfriends involved, wives, friends with a paper and pencil. A long time.
See, one of the huge complexities of this duck race and what makes us unique is that this is not the kind of a duck race that gives out big prizes to people. There are duck races that say the first prize is a Jeep or something like that. That's not what this duck race is all about. As Nikki said, what we're doing here is getting money back into the community. Well, each year, nowadays, we have in the neighborhood of 60 charities, 60 to 70 charities that are going to benefit from that duck race. And so keeping track of how much goes to each one of these charities is also another big problem. And it's all computerized as part of that deal.
And for a number of those charities, this is a major
This is
contribution
the
for the year.
Yeah. And the beauty of this is that the charities can do as much as they want. The Rotary Club has no involvement in that. If the charity wants to go out and really sell a bunch of adoption forms, they can. If they're content with just selling 50 adoption forms, they can do that too. It's all up to them. The money goes to them. We turn back $19 out of every $20, which is awesome return rate.
It is, yeah, for any charitable.
For any charity. If you look at some of these big name charities,
We're not going there.
they're very small returns. We do a lot.
Well, security is part of this issue also with the computer system because people don't know which duck is theirs. They
Right.
can't tell. from the
Yeah,
numbers.
sure, that's right.
The way the computer system works is that nobody, including me, knows what the relationship is between the duck numbers and who's going to win the prizes.
Okay.
Only the computer knows, and it spits it out and puts it on those prize boards as the race evolves.
Yeah, the community supported aspect of the duck
Oh,
race.
it's huge.
Really is, I mean, something that this community be really proud of, the way it's
You know
supported.
something I gotta say about the community is no matter what charity or what fundraiser you're doing, they always been supportive. I mean,
Always.
100%.
And this is a very charitable community. It supports everything.
It's amazing.
Jim, Don came up with an issue about the 95% issue. And most duck races around the country are organized and handled by a professional company. And
Okay.
one of the reasons we're so successful and able to contribute back such a huge percentage of the sales or adoptions that come in is the fact that we administer the whole thing. We control it, and we
Everything.
only take $1 for administrative fee.
I think there's an outfit out of Arizona
Yep.
that will
Run a duck
give
race
you
for
a
you.
duck's rate, they'll give you all this, but they take a big.
But it wouldn't be the same event.
No, my
if they-
figures I got are 50%
It
is
would
what they
change
take.
the dynamics, the support, the atmosphere.
I know that my wife is active in the Estes Park Women's Club. They sell adoption forms 12 months of the year.
They actually take pre-orders. We don't even know what the race is going to be yet, and they're busy selling.
You know the title of their new book, When the Women Took Over.
That's right.
Then the women took over.
Then the women took over.
Then the women took
You know, Jim, you talked about the community and being a very charitable and very giving community. Think about this. Nowadays, the duck race turns back over $100,000 every year. Now, you think about this little bitty community of 5,000 or 6,000 people turning back $100,000. That's amazing.
It's incredible, yeah.
In some of the studies I have done, there are duck races where they sell many more ducks than us, but their net results are way
Way
lower.
less. It's all because of the way it's structured, what the dynamics are.
Yep.
And the fact that it's for the community and run by the community.
Exactly.
And we haven't touched on how it is supported economically. There are a lot of costs associated with the duck race, and we have events to raise money to be able to support the duck race so that the money that comes in for duck adoptions can be given to the charities of the people's
So
choice.
you protect that 5%.
Yeah.
That's
And-
extraordinary. I mean, you go out of your way to protect that
Yep.
5%.
And it's been that way since it started. Since Since Nikki put the first race together up there, it's been $20 per adoption, and $1 of that is retained as an operating expense, and that doesn't come close to covering our operating expenses. And as Rob has pointed out, we have a number of fundraising options that we use to cover our operating costs so that we can get that 95% back to the community.
That's a very powerful message to send out.
I think there's one other change that took place, and that is the way you determine what organizations can participate. I know the first year we had in '94, we had a young fella, 17-year-old baseball player here in Estes Park, who had been selected to play in an all-star game, East-West, and $4,000 to get there. And he sold $4,000 worth. And the 8th grade class raises money for their Washington D.C. trip.
Every year. They're one of the big duck raising, money raising efforts. They sent those kids out and start knocking on the doors.
How many organizations now?
Well, this year there's 63.
63.
It runs 60 to 70 each year.
That's a lot of organizations.
We open it up to all qualified organizations. We have 2 rules. Okay, number 1, you have to be a benefit to the community. Number 2, you have to have a local presence. That's it. And organizations come and go.
Sure.
They do it for a while, and then they decide they don't want to do it. It's their choice. We don't care. All we are is the facilitator.
Amazing.
One of the interesting ones is the Eagle Rock is a big seller, but we were out there, they had a Rotary meeting, and Robert Burkhart said, we're not competing with the local residents. Our sales are to Eagle Rock alums around the country.
Well, I saw a notebook with the distribution of where those tickets are, and that is incredible.
Yes.
I mean, this is not only, this is a national event.
Yeah, we have a fairly large participation outside of Estes Park, outside of Colorado, even up to and including Canada.
International event.
2 years ago, we decided that what we were going to do was to turn this thing online, and we now sell adoptions online. So, particularly for the Eagle Rock alumni who are all over the place, it's awkward for them to purchase an adoption.
Sure.
But by having an online system, they can, they can be in New York City or wherever and order up adoptions. And in fact, these people actually do win.
That's encouraging.
Now, one of the things, didn't we have a winner several years ago that had not yet been born?
Oh, Rufus Duryea. The first prize winner a few years back was an adoption form, and the name on it was Rufus Duryea. We had no idea who Rufus Duryea was. Well, it turned out that this was the unborn grandchild of Bud Duryea here in Estes Park. He had purchased a ticket and had just simply written this name in because they didn't know what they were going to get. So Rufus won the grand prize that year, and he wasn't even born.
I had a grandnephew in Columbus, Ohio, who one year won, I sold him adoption forms, one year won $10 worth of donuts from the donut house. Well, I ended up eating the donuts and sent him the $10.
Well, talking about names, I got to ask this. Your mascot, Quilton T.
Canvasback. Quilton T.
How did you
Canvasback.
come up with that?
We had a contest to name the ducks with a 3rd grade class, and in my notebook, I ran it yesterday, but I couldn't find it this morning, the final names. I mean, there was Flapper, and there was some names that are really, you would call them obvious names for a duck, but we came up with Quilton T. Canvasback.
So that's in the middle 90s or so, right?
94.
94.
Don't know how 3rd graders came up with that name.
And,
No idea.
and,
Yeah,
the, and the costume? When did that came at the same time?
Same time. I've got, I was showing Jack this morning,
$450.
$450. We wanted orange beak, orange feet, orange legs, and yellow costume.
And is that when the big duck thing got? No.
No, that was.
Talk about. I know that the organizer, the chair, is the big duck.
Big duck.
Okay, and so how did that? That was just an obvious kind of
I don't,
No, actually,
That's
this,
just
it pretty well happened during Dennis's big duck ship. For a long time, we had the chairman of the committee, okay?
Yeah.
But somehow or other, we kind of got into the notion of having the big duck.
I was the chairman of the Duck Fest.
Okay.
And we would have meetings once a month, a year ahead, and then it went to 2 weeks, and finally once a week just prior to the duck race. And we had to get our business done in these hour-long meetings. And a couple of times, one of our members kept talking in the background. And finally I said, please keep it quiet. I am the big duck.
And it stuck. Okay. Now, the good part about the big duck is that we also have a little duck. And the little duck is the understudy to the big duck who will become the big duck next year.
Could call the duck in waiting, in other words. Okay.
And we have one more, which is the past big duck is now called the lame duck.
Okay, all right.
So we're all lame ducks.
And we had a scribe duck.
We have a scribe duck.
I was scribe duck for 5 years.
That's the secretary.
Yes.
Yeah,
Keeps the
okay.
minutes of the meeting.
And the treasurer? No,
Keeper of the nest egg.
Okay, all right, that works.
well, that's a big change because the early years as chairman, I kept all the minutes because I could recognize the printer, the print of it.
There's other, I have to ask you too about, how am I gonna put this? The year somebody tried to fix, put the fix in on the race and,
Yep.
and the ducks arrived, what, an hour
Yeah.
ahead or so?
Two of them.
Two hours.
Well, talk about that.
Well, I don't remember if that was the first year we had it or the second year, but all of a sudden these two ducks show up almost before we dumped the ducks in the river at Nicky's. I mean, and our guess was that somebody had purloined them from the previous year, said, well, let's just throw them in the water.
But regardless of what we do, we always have ducks that escape, not necessarily
Sure,
stolen, but
sure. But you did catch the perpetrators, correct? I mean, you were able to intervene before the scam was completed?
I don't recall that.
I don't recall,
I don't
but they
think-
wouldn't,
No, I don't think
But
he ever
I
got
think-
cut.
Oh,
they
okay.
wouldn't know because you don't adopt that duck. You just
See,
have an adoption form.
the ducks that go in, nobody knows who owns them.
Okay,
Only
sure.
the computer knows.
Okay. So you simply disqualified the ducks?
Disqualified the
You're
ducks.
out of the race?
Yeah.
Okay,
That's right.
okay.
Yep.
Our time is about up, but I want to do a couple more things before we stop. I want to ask each of you to share one additional story or anecdote, maybe touching your own personal experience, involvement with the race, or anything, any other, just a story.
Margie handled publicity. We're getting ready to, I think, the Friday before the race. We have a half-page ad in the Trail Gazette, and it says the race will start up Fall River Road. Not at
But
Nicky's.
it didn't say where.
It didn't say where. So life could be a little embarrassing.
Well said.
I have a story that Nicky maybe doesn't remember. I hope he doesn't.
Yeah.
That we had, in the early days, we had a Rotarian member that had a huge crane. What was his name, John Hadley or something?
John, yeah, right.
This huge crane. And he brought this thing in, it was about as long as this room is. And he put the boom up, and he was out by your side. And he's backing and goes, we used to put the ducks initially in from the parking lot. And he would lift it way up over the trees and the crowd and drop the ducks in. And he's maneuvering. I'm standing there watching this thing, and he's getting closer and closer to Nicky's sign, and I'm running and yelling, stop, stop. He probably stopped about that close to your sign.
Yeah.
And that was
But this thing was,
huge.
I mean, what do you call them? Skyscraper. This thing will go up 400 feet.
And go way out across all the trees and so forth.
Other stories from
Yeah, now I remember that one, yeah.
Anybody else want to toss one
I
in
have
that
one.
time?
One of the things that we do every year when the new big duck comes on is we say to the big duck, something will happen this year that no one could possibly have predicted. Don't worry about it. We'll fix it. Well, that happens all the time. And I remember very well back in 2006 when Bill Wachs was big duck, we had a woman who was busily bringing in adoption forms from the organization, and we were posting them and all this sort of thing. And it was only just before the race that a chance remark showed us that she wasn't with the organization we thought. She thought that anybody could just simply wander in and start getting duck race credits, if you will. So all of a sudden, here we are getting ready for the race, and we suddenly have a new organization that we have to suddenly go back into the records and figure out, well, this one, and that one were actually for this organization as opposed to that organization over there.
So,
like I said, things happen that you can't predict. You just deal with it.
One other thing that happened that you couldn't predict was that a woman, I believe, down in Fort Collins was going to sick the forester that takes care of the animals in the area.
Oh, Rick Smart, the Division of Wildlife.
animal control, whatever they call it.
She was going to sick him on us because we were up there torturing all those poor little guys.
She got very literal in her early. Any other stories?
Yeah, I was working with Bill Lodge, who was in charge of shirt sales when I first started with the duck race. And I gradually morphed into being in charge of shirt sales. And finally, it changed to retail sales when we sold more things than just shirts. But we originally had shirts made with the duck race logo on them. Local shirt shops made things for us. We had sweatshirts and t-shirts, polo shirts, and people wanted to see the year on the shirt. Well, we ordered some fairly good quantities of shirts, and we had them left over. Nobody wanted them the next year.
Oh, yeah, well, yeah.
But among the oddities of things that did get sold, not by Rotary, but by a local bar, was the bottle of beer, which was
The one I have over here.
Waddle Wheat beer. And that was made by the local brewery just for the duck race, and it was only sold on
That year.
that year.
Wow, Rob,
And
This is worth a
the,
lot of money in another 25 years.
Yeah, well, that's right.
Rob,
and the other things that happened were that, as I indicated, we started selling gewgaws, and which eventually took over. We stopped selling shirts because of inventory problems and carryover problems and that sort of thing. But we usually did a booming business at Nicky's and then down at the Wheel Bar.
Yeah.
And we had necklaces, we had pewter things.
One of these.
Yeah.
Rob, you don't want to call them gewgaws. They're valuable duck race collectibles.
Yeah, yes they are. And I'm a cap collector, and I've got about a dozen caps down here that came from the duck race at one time or
We've
another.
got one
But
cap
there's
here.
also one there with the duck eyes on it.
I'm not going to
that's-
put this on.
That's my wife's cap.
Rob, we also in '96 sold mouse pads.
Oh, yeah.
Much used mouse pad, too.
Much used that mouse pad, and I ended up
With the design.
looking around the house, and I'll be damned if I don't have the original artwork for that.
That's great.
There have been a number of posters and this kind of thing over the years, but it's been really kind of hit and miss. Some of the better posters are up here on the wall. we're not really well organized to do posters each year.
That'll come. That'll come.
Yeah.
I'll let you go, but you know, with any luck, 25 years from now, somebody is going to be sitting in your chair, and
I'll be
Yes, Nick.
and somebody will be sitting in my chair. So if you had one thing to say to those folks sitting in your chairs 25 years from now, what would you say to them?
You mean
about
other than don't do it?
No. No, I don't think that's the message you want to send forward.
I'd say have fun doing it.
Indeed. Indeed.
Yeah.
That's the big principle here.
I would say stay the course.
Stay the course.
And adhere to our mission statement, and our original statement, if I have a moment, is this. Duck Race is a community service project of the Rotary Club of Estes Park. Its mission is to assist local organizations in raising funds for the respective groups in order to benefit the entire Estes Park community. The Rotary Duck Race Committee is responsible for organizing, promoting, ministering the event with the goal of returning no less than 95% of the funds raised to the participating organizations.
Stay the course. Anybody else?
Keep it up.
Keep it up. Okay.
What I want to say is that knowing where I came from, I grew up in a big city in Chicago. And the duck race and these other charities that's been given over the years, it left an impact in my life, how the community can come together and do something.
So there's a powerful lesson that helping people has its own special rewards.
Well, my thought on that was that just to keep the duck race fun for Rotary and profitable for the charities. And if we can keep that going for 25 years, it'll be wonderful.
And that's the real issue. I mean, we remind ourselves about that mission, as Jack reported it all the time. You know, every time we say, well, how about this, how about that, we go back and touch that mission and say, is this consistent with the mission?
Well, and the key is it's a community service project. We're in a lot of communities where the duck race is a fundraising project for the principal organization.
Right.
It is not a fundraiser for Rotary.
Yeah. This is not a fundraiser for us. We don't make any money on this. This is entirely intended to support the community.
Well, this is a special community, and this is a very special event.
We facilitate the raising of the money for the charities.
We need to keep the cost of adopting a duck reasonable so more people will be willing to participate. There are duck races where the tickets are $100 each, and I can't imagine buying a ticket for $100.
But those kind of races have the big prizes.
Sure.
They're not intended to push the money back in the community.
They're gambling.
They're gambling.
The flip side of that is, I think, way back, Aspen used to sell their adoption forms for $5, but they had 25,000 ducks, and they couldn't get any more ducks, so there's a cap on how many.
It gets logistically impossible. You have no idea what it's like when the race starts and the river suddenly turns yellow.
Yeah.
Well, thank you guys for being here, and thank you for doing what you've done for the duck race and for Estes Park. I know it's been a labor of love, and we'll hope that for the next 25 years it continues to be a labor of love, whoever gets the chance to carry this thing on, because it's really special. So thanks a lot.
You're quite welcome.
Thanks, Jim.